Hi, welcome to episode 36 of the Edgar Rice Burroughs podcast, where we celebrate the works of the greatest adventure writer of the 20th century. My name is Tim DeForest. An author on books about early 20th century pop culture, such as the pulp magazines where Burroughs was published. And I'm going to let my two co-hosts introduce themselves. Jess?
Well, my name is Jess Terrell, and you all might know me from the Facebook discussion group for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs, where we talked ERB, Tarzan, John Carter, and a whole host of heroes pretty near 24/7 for the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs on Facebook.
And my name is Scott Stewart. I'm a writer, editor, ghostwriter, and fortunate to be the current editor of the ERB APA, Herb APA, as we like to call it. And looking forward to what we're talking about tonight.
Okay. And what we are talking about tonight is not what I said we would be doing last time. In a fit of whimsy at the end of us recording the previous episode, I said, hey, let's do a commentary on a Gilligan's Island episode called Jungle Boy, which is an episode that obviously would not exist if Tarzan weren't a part of our pop culture. But I watched it and it was fun slapstick, as all Gilligan's Island episodes are, but there's not really much to talk about other than commenting on the comedy of the episode. So we've set that idea aside. There's some parallel universe probably where we're doing commentary on the Gilligan's Island episode, but we won't be doing that here. What we will be talking about is a new Tarzan book, Tarzan Back to Mars, written by Will Murray. Just a book that I had barrels of fun reading, that is respectful to the Edgar Rice Burroughs universe and just tells a brand new multi-planet adventure. Before we get into that, though, yes, I believe I hear the apes of Kershak reminding us that we have a few special things to cover first. First, there's something that's not in the script I sent you guys because I just thought we needed to include it. On our YouTube channel, in response to the last episode about Return of the Mucker, in that episode, we commented about how the main character, the Mucker, possibly could have learned how to ride a horse because he was doing a lot of horse riding in that story. And he was from, he grew up as a member of an urban gang. So where did he learn to ride a horse? On our YouTube channel, somebody commented that horses in big cities were not uncommon. They were used for, milk deliveries and you saw them all over the place, even after automobiles started becoming a thing. Horses were still very common. So it's not impossible that the Mucker, while he was growing up, was able to get a horse riding lesson in. I still think it's a little unlikely because of the life he was living, but we might have been a little harsh when we were making fun of how he mysteriously acquired horse riding skills. So that was I appreciated the comment from a fan who was listening to our podcast, and he makes a good point that maybe that character did have a chance to learn how to ride a horse.
Good to rein that in.
Yeah. And
A good point. It's not impossible police could use horses.
yeah, police probably would have used horses. At this when this story was written in 19 teens, cars would have just been becoming a thing. So you would have had more horse-drawn vehicles in a big city than cars. And police would have been using horses a lot. So yeah, maybe he stole a horse from the cops once, making a getaway when he was still, doing illegal stuff. So
there's an idea for a early story.
there is. Yeah, how did the Mucker learn to ride a horse? So, and anyway, the second thing is our trivia contest. Now, I'm about to ask a trivia question, and if you know the answer, send it to our email address at edgarsmailbag@gmail.com. That is how you get into the pool, by sending the correct answer to that Gmail address for a drawing to win a copy of the new authorized edition of Tarzan and the Forbidden City, which has this awesome Joe Jusko cover of Tarzan fighting a dinosaur. All of Jusko's covers in the new authorized editions are just breathtaking. And this is one of my favorites because dinosaurs always make everything better. So I'm about to ask the trivia question. Remember, if you post the answer on social media somewhere, You don't get credit for it. You have to send it to the Gmail address to be in on the trivia question. And the question is, how are Nicholas Rokoff and the Countess Olga de Counde related? And I'm probably mispronouncing Olga's last name because my French is horrible. But how are Nicholas Rokoff and the Countess Olga de Counde related? So just send that answer to edgarsmailbag@gmail.com. It will also be in the notes for this episode. And if you have the right answer, and you're the only right answer, you win Tarzan and the Forbidden City. If there's more than one right answer, we will randomly pick somebody to get the book. And so that are our special features. So now we're going to dive into Will Murray's excellent book, Tarzan Back to Mars, which was published just last year in 2023. It is the second book he's written where Tarzan is teleported to Mars. And the books are pretty much independent of each other. If you have not read Tarzan, Conqueror of Mars, you can still read and fully appreciate Tarzan Back to Mars. The thing that connects them is when we get to Tarzan Back to Mars, Tarzan has already learned the mysterious process of teleporting himself from Earth to Mars and later teleporting himself back. So he knows how to do that from his initial trip there in the previous novel. He's also already met John Carter and befriended him. But the two stories are otherwise not related to or not connected heavily to each other. They can be enjoyed independently. Also, I should mention Tarzan knows the Barsoomian language already when this book begins. So when he gets to Mars, a few chapters in, he will be able to communicate with anybody he meets on Barsoom. I also want to mention before we start our chapter by chapter summary, this book is not an official part of the ERB universe. It's what's called part of the Wild Adventures of Tarzan, which are not necessarily considered to be an official part of the official continuity of the ERB universe, as many of the other newer books are. I don't think really that matters to that much because the book is very faithful to Tarzan's character. It's faithful to ERB's portrayal of Barsoom. It's a ton of fun to read. I felt like I was reading a book about the real Tarzan and the real John Carter because he catches those characters perfectly. And so if in your own headcanon you want to say this is a real Tarzan adventure, you're welcome to do so. But I just wanted to mention the official status. So any initial comments from either of you before we start doing the chapter summaries?
Well, I'd like to add to that, if I might, real quick. That book is written by William Patrick Murray, Will Murray, who always does a fine job. And certainly I understand and agree with your point about this being, shall we say, outside or separate from the ERB universe series. But it's still a fine Tarzan adventure. And you can say you don't have to read the other Tarzan Mars book if you don't want to, but I would encourage that you do so just for the thrill of the adventure. And I will say there's a couple things, because I will make this comment later. There's a couple things that Tarzan learned on his first trip to Mars or Barsoom, such as how to speak the language, and a couple of other things he learned that saves him some time, and maybe the reader some time also in this second Tarzan Mars book. That's all. That's everything I have.
Yeah, I agree with that. He also, for instance, he expects the low gravity, and it's pretty. He gets close. He gets used to moving on Mars without, accidentally jumping into the air fairly quickly because he's already had experience with it.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to add in there too. This is absolutely a fun book to read, and I continue to be impressed by people like Will, and you got Wynn, Christopher, Chris, Wolf, the number of people Gary, who have been writing these books, wild adventure books, or the ones in the official canon carrying on the ERB universe. And the writing, all of them, the writing is so clean. It's so faithful, so well here. What you said about capturing John Carter and Tarzan here, Will does a marvelous job for it. It's easy reading, not meaning it's low level younger age reading. It's very clean prose,
Mhm.
very much a storytelling thing that ERB does. And the other writers we've talked about before and on other ones, I'm just over and over impressed by the quality of the writing. These
Mhm.
some people might sometimes say, "Oh, these new iterations and etc." Well, they're kind of hack jobs. These are nowhere near this. These are top-notch performers all the way. And I'd have to say for Christopher Carey and the other ones at ERB Inc. who go through these manuscripts and read them, do a fabulous job with them. I believe Jess, and I know we've all had different authors and books where people have given us preview copies, comment on. I believe Jess, you might have been involved on this one, named in it or whatever, maybe reading or commenting or helping with the book and publish. But there's a fantastic support group out there bringing really quality material.
To address your question, I did get an early look at this book. It was fun to watch it come together. I
Mhm.
appreciate Will providing that opportunity for me to take a quick look at the working
Mhm.
process. So yeah,
Yeah,
I was involved.
and I will say that Will Murray's career as a writer, which goes back some decades now. I'm sorry, Will, if you're listening, I didn't mean to say you were old, but you've been writing for quite a while. Um,
Experience.
he has a real talent of being able to take characters created by other people. He does it with the ERB characters. He's done it with the Shadow. He's done it with Doc Savage. He's done it with King Kong. He's done it with Nick Fury from the Marvel universe in his novels. He is able to portray those characters exactly the way they should be. A longtime fan of the Shadow can read, or the Spider or another pulp character can read a Will Murray novel featuring those characters, and 99% of those fans are going to say, that's it. That's the character I've always loved. He gets it perfectly. Um, so aside from being just an excellent storyteller with the clean prose, Scott, that you pointed out, that he moves the story along and tells it well, he just understands these characters and he catches who they are perfectly in the books. And Tarzan Back to Mars is a great example of that. So this book is 40 chapters long. So we are going to be summarizing it so that to keep this from being an 8-hour podcast, we're going to be summarizing it 5 chapters at a time. I will do a summary and then we will comment on the events of those chapters. So if you guys are okay with it, I'm going to start diving into the chapters 1 through 5. So it begins with Tarzan coming back from war. Apparently, he served as a pilot after the events of Tarzan and the Foreign Legion. And he's allowed to keep the plane that he used, which is a P-40 Tomahawk fighter, which is just a cool. Of course, just about any fighter plane from World War II is inherently cool, but this is one of the cool ones. He spots men flying metal birds, and he follows them until the fuel goes low. An arrow is fired at him that lodges in the plane, and he keeps this arrow. That's going to be important later. He flies home, and then later, after he gets a reunion with Jane, he takes some Wazari warriors and Jad Baljah, the Golden Lion, out on a scouting mission to find the bird people. He's worried about who they are. Now, he shoots down a metal bird using the arrow he acquired earlier, and he captures the pilot. From the man's language, he realizes that this guy is an Orovar from Mars, a member of the white Martian race. He learns that a group of Martians and some Martian animals have arrived from Mars. They came by spaceship, and though their ship has crashed near Lake Victoria. They plan to colonize Africa, and another ship will be coming soon with even more of these guys. So the Martians and their mounts are wearing armor also that block out some of Earth's gravity, which is how they're able to move normally while on Earth. Tarzan realizes that the invading Martians and their animals will completely destroy the ecology of Africa. So he presses on with the Wazari to deal with them. Chapter 5 ends with Jad Baljah encountering something in the jungle. And any Burroughs fan at this point is going to guess in advance that Jad is fighting a band. So that is the first 5 chapters. The Will dives and I've never met Will Murray. I keep calling him by his first name. I hope, Will, if you're listening, that you don't mind. It's just easier than Mr. Murray. I don't want to be disrespectful, but Will just dives right into the story. The action starts out right away. I noticed that he doesn't give any details about his Tarzan's World War II activities. And I'm thinking, is this something he's saving for another novel, perhaps, to jump back to what Tarzan did in an official capacity during World War II? Because all we know from Burroughs is that when he was flying to Asia in a bomber, after being reactivated in the reserves, that bomber crashed, and he had an adventure in the jungle with the crew of the bomber and some other people they found interfering with the Japanese military activities. So we don't know what he did after he got out of the jungle. And Murray does not give any details here about that. So I think he's saving it for another novel. Something else I noted is Muravo. Muravo, am I saying his name right? From Muvaro. He's a lot older, and that makes sense because there's no indication that he ever took the immortalities pills from Tarzan's quest. So if he was in his 20s during the Beast of Tarzan, he'd be in his 50s during the event of this book. If he was in his 30s during Beast, he'd now be in his 60s. Tarzan, of course, because of the witch doctor treatments we're told about in Foreign Legion, he doesn't age. Jad Balja would be about 30 years old, having been found as a cub right after World War I. Male lions usually only live 10 years, which means he would have died before the immortality pills found in Quest. I'm going to propose that Jad is a member of a species that inhabit jungles rather than plains, as real-life lions do, and that they has a longer lifespan. So I'm proposing that the lions that Tarzan often encountered in the jungle are a different species and live longer than the lions in the plains do. But regardless of this, I don't want to overanalyze it because obviously Will had to include Jad in the early chapters since the Jad versus Banth fight is practically a legal requirement when you're doing a Tarzan Mars crossover. So I don't object to its cheating a little on Jad's age. Comments from you guys about these chapters?
Well, if I may jump in here, I was going to and I brought it over so we could show it on camera, but we're not using camera, are we?
No.
Yeah. In the prior Tarzan book, written by Will Murray, he had a was it P40 Mustang in there also. And in fact, it's pictured on the back of the artwork for Tarzan Return to the Paludan. And this is cover art by Joe DeVito, by the way. But yeah, it's back here. So those are extraordinary planes, I think.
Yeah.
With the shark.
I have to admit, I've had that one on my Kindle since it came out, and that's the one trouble with getting books electronically is sometimes they're hidden in your Kindle and you forget they're there because they're not physically there. I have not read that one yet. I'm embarrassed to admit. I know I'll love it, but is that one set during World War II?
Yes. You could say this is the forerunner.
Okay.
To the book that we're discussing tonight. Because those things that Tarzan, which I mentioned before we went on air, those things that Tarzan learned on his first trip to Barsoom. I beg your pardon. I'm leaving a book out. This book does not include a trip to Barsoom. I'm terribly sorry. I'm confused. Anyhow, this is a Return to Paludan we're discussing here. The other Tarzan Mars book, that's the one that gave him some ground info.
But the Paludan book will then give some details of Tarzan's World War II activity. So
he'll cover a little bit of that.
Okay, so Will wasn't necessarily not hiding something for a future adventure. He was just not giving spoilers for one he already wrote. So okay, that's cool. That's good to know, and I did not know that. So Scott, any remarks from you about the first 5 chapters?
Yeah, one of the things I liked right off in this chapter is when he goes and starts chasing the mechanical birds. Yeah, Will Murray doesn't fall into the trope that you see so often in stories, where he's chasing like, oh no, I'm running out of gas. I'm going to have to crash land and then get captured or something like that. He's showing that his discipline, his own personal discipline, because we know sometimes in other books, action takes Tarzan away where he's not always aware of the timing or something, But here and coming back from the war, being aware of the fuel tank, he's like, oh, I have to stop this chase. I can't explore any farther because I'm going to run out of gas. And he takes and he gets back to his home. You know, I really like the fact that wasn't just like a convenient, oh, he's chasing him in, he drops into the ocean now, or ocean, yeah, jungle, and has to fight him one-on-one. I really like that he took that discipline of paying attention to what he's flying and that, and doing, like when you're watching movies sometimes, it's like, hey, dude, you're running out of gas, land the plane before you crash. So I really appreciate the fact that he handled Tarzan that way.
Yeah, because by now
Another thing I
Tarzan.
was thinking about.
No, go
I was
ahead.
just
Go
gonna
ahead. Go ahead, Scott.
and I was just going to add on for Jad, Jad being raised and living with Tarzan, he could have been treated more if he had infections or illnesses and
Yeah.
lived more in a way, even though he roams the jungle and fights, maybe a more sheltered life, and that could expand upon his lifespan as well.
That's actually a fair point. That's another way of looking at it. Will does not go into why Jad is still around, even though he's beat old for a lion, and I don't think he needed to. You want Jad there. He has to be there. There has to be a Jad Banth fight, or the villagers would riot because you can't not have a Jad Banth fight. And I like your remark about Tarzan acting like an experienced, intelligent pilot. It reminds me his first solo fight was Tarzan and the Ant-Man, where he crashes because he really made a piloting error. So he's learned his lessons in the 20 plus years since then. And he now pays attention to what he's doing when he's flying a lot better than he did on his very first solo fight. So,
yeah.
I wanted to, regarding Jad, I wanted to note that in the prior Tarzan Mars book by Will Murray, Jad appears there as well, and I think plays a significant role. And all he's doing, I'll give a big spoiler here. This is regarding the first Tarzan Mars book. But all Jad does, not really all, but an important task that Jad does in that book is just keep tabs on the body of Tarzan. While Tarzan's indisposed over Barsoom, his body's still there on Earth, and Jad looks after it. Which, since I wanted Tarzan to come back, I felt that was an important chore. Not very exciting, perhaps. And
but
it kind of keeps you glued to one spot.
But shows the bond, the loyalty.
Yeah,
exactly.
It does.
Exactly.
It does. Okay, and we're going to move on to chapters 6 through 10. Which chapter 6 starts with the Jad Banth fight. Tarzan jumps in to help kill the Banth because Jad's pretty awesome, but the Banths are larger than Earth Lions, and Tarzan does need to step in to help. Tarzan and his men press on. They use captured Martian arrows to be able to shoot down some more of the metal birds. And later they ambush a convoy of war chariots pulled by Zitidars, though this is a different species of Zitidars than he saw the last time he was on Mars. He guesses they come from a more temperate climate on the plains, a more temperate climate than the plains he was on during his last visit to Barsoom, which is a fact that will be important later. Tarzan approaches the Orovar, the White Martians, in a captured chariot with the prisoner. He tries to negotiate with the Orovar, but that's to no avail. They like the land. They're not going to back off. They like this land. They're from a dying planet with almost no water. So now they've got this lush foliage. They're right next to Lake Victoria, so they have all this plentiful food and water. So a fight starts. Now, there are a few of the Orovar that have radium rifles, and they outnumber the Wazari. So the fight begins to turn against Tarzan and his allies. But the day is saved when Korak shows up. He got back from the war after Tarzan had left on this expedition. He shows up in the P-40, and he strafes the Martian, and he turns the tide of the battle. And the Orovar are wiped out. And Tarzan makes sure that the Barsoomian animals are killed also, so they don't damage the African ecology further. And then later he realizes he's got to return to Barsoom. He knows there's another ship coming, and a bigger ship with even more Martian colonists. So he's got to go to Barsoom and try and prevent the invaders from coming to Earth. Some of the things I got from this is the Orovar are clearly the bad guys, but they're presented as brave warriors. They're not mindlessly evil. They have a motivation you can actually understand from their point of view. And I appreciated that. So it makes sense that Korak could fly a plane. I think in Tarzan and the Ant-Man, he was the one teaching his dad to fly, right?
He owned the plane, yes.
Yeah, he owned the plane.
It was his insurance that had to pay for it when Tarzan crashed it.
Yes. Okay. Was Korak included on the insurance? That's what I want to know. That's going to be a quibbling point when he files a claim. Now Tarzan uses intelligent tactics throughout, such as having the Wazari fire a simultaneous volley against the birds, or taking bits of armor off the Oravar or the Zitadar to use gravity against them. And the action scenes throughout they're not just like well written in terms of intelligent tactics. They're uniformly exciting. Will knows how to describe exciting action. He does that well in all his books. And these are some fun to read battle scenes here. Both the full scale battle against the Oravar and the Tarzan and Jad fight against the Banth. They're just great stuff. Comments from you guys?
I would like for y'all to explain to me why on earth, of all things you could take from Barsoom to Earth with you, why on earth would you take a load of Banths with you? Why take this thing? All they're going to do is stir up a fuss. They're going to try to eat everything in sight. They're very aggressive. They got multiple feet, and which means multiple claws. Those things are dangerous. Why would you bring those with you?
They wanted to bring as much of Mars as they could. If we were colonizing another planet, we wanted to terraform it into a new Earth, we'd bring as many different animals as we could. So
we'll probably take the elephants, the last few elephants and the giraffes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, because you would want to preserve them. So, because they're thinking, well, Mars is going to die eventually, so let's establish a new Mars, a new Barsoom on Earth. You would need the animals that are dangerous as well as the ones that you've tamed. That would be my thought anyway.
Well, actually, I understand that and I can see that, but by God, it just sounds dangerous to me. Those are
well, maybe they did it just because it's going to turn out their queen is nuts. And she said, take a Banth. Why? Just because I said so. So
actually, that's probably what happened.
They might also felt having some Banths out there, they knew what to expect from them, but maybe they thought they would be an extra protection in a way against other animals or people native to Earth that they might take those out, sort of like watchdogs.
That could be true. It could work even without training. They would work if they start roaring and killing stuff, something's nearby. So
I also liked, this goes from the last chapter too, where Tarzan's first shooting at mechanical birds and he's just using regular arrows. So when he pulls the one out that he captured or found stuck into his plane with the metal built into it, he decides to try that. So it shows that metal is comparable to be a weapon against these mechanical birds, and they know the importance of the other warriors to use them more. And I also like the fact that you're like, okay, we're going to root for Jad, right? Regardless. But going against the Banth, where they're talking about how the Banth is challenged by the fact that it's too big and heavy and clumsy for Earth's gravity. And I think that makes a very good point why Tarzan can come up there and Jad hasn't been ripped apart or dead yet, as it might be. Of course, on Mars, Jad would be able to jump 100 feet, 1,000 feet. Anyway. But and he does this both on Mars and Earth with the people in their uniforms, showing the differences that weight come in. I think that's a really great perspective and a valid scientific one.
Yeah, and it's neat that I mentioned that Tarzan's using intelligent tactics throughout. It's neat that Will, when he put this story together, thought of the consequences of everything, the existence of those arrows, the need to deal with the gravity difference, all of that. He thought of all of that, included it in the story, and then used it as part of Tarzan's tactics in the battles. So it all comes together really kind of neatly. It's just a great example of superb storytelling.
A point I would like to add here as we approach the next set of chapters, be mindful or just be aware that the narrator of the story changes periodically. It might be Tarzan, it might be John Carter. Seems like there's a third person that narrates one or two chapters, but I don't recall who it is.
We get a few bits told from the point of view of the villains. So,
okay. Yeah, it doesn't hurt anything. It's perfectly okay, and actually it's informative to the reader. But just be aware that it's there. That's all. All right,
Yeah.
go ahead.
And one other thing I forgot to say
Mhm.
coming up in these chapters, anytime Korak makes an appearance to me makes for better stories.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Korak's been a
know.
long time favorite since
Of course.
I read the Korak comics in the 60s when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a long shortage of Korok stories, and there's one in the works right now from Win Eckert. So I want to be sure to plug that. But yeah, there's always room for another good Korok story. That's for sure.
Yeah, Korak's awesome in his own right, and he does deserve more stories than he has. So, okay, chapters 11 through 15. Tarzan teleports himself to Mars. He like gets himself stuck in like I forget, he builds a small building or he's just stuck in the attic or something because his physical body, his Earth body will remain on Earth while he teleports to Mars and somehow ends up in a physical body, an identical physical body up there. Something that Burroughs never explained. It's just the way it works. And I don't think he needed to explain it. I think leaving some mysteries to Mars, to Barsoom, was the wise thing to do. But he finds himself in what many Burroughs fans will recognize as the land of Bantoom, where you have the Caldanes. The Caldanes are just the heads, and they mount themselves on these headless bodies called Rykors, and um, there was in the Chessmen of Mars, there was a Chaldean who turned out to be an ally of the good guys, but most of the Chaldeans are pretty nasty people. Tarzan has no idea who they are. He sees two of them practicing using telepathic control of their Rykars, controlling them without attaching themselves first. Tarzan, in the meantime, he does quickly acclimate to the lower gravity, and he tries to talk to the Chaldeans, but he's just attacked. He defeats them and he finds out from one of them that helium is on the other side of the planet. So he teleported up randomly, ends up on the wrong side of the planet. He uses his Earth muscles to escape Bantoom, and he spots a flyer having mechanical trouble, and he jumps aboard. Now here he meets a woman that we're going to find out is Lana of Gathol, John Carter's granddaughter. And she doesn't trust Tarzan at first, but he kills a pair of white apes and he helps repair her flyer. So they get to be allies. They return to Gathol, where her husband, Pandan Chi, contacts John Carter. And Tarzan has heard the name. He's heard the name when he was on Earth talking to the Martians there before they died. He heard the name Nolthum. And he learns from Pandan Chi that that's an ancient city whose location is now unknown. Now, chapter 15, the last of this group we're talking about, that's where it switches to first person narration. We start getting the story from John Carter's point of view. And I like that Will remember that Tarzan stories were always written in the third person, but when John Carter was a hero in a story, it was first person, himself narrating. And I like that he does that here. Whenever we switch to John Carter's point of view, it becomes first person narration. It's done very clearly. I felt no confusion at all when I was reading this. I understood what was going on immediately. But he and Tarkus are busy leading troops against the rampaging Warhoons, which are the more brutal of the Green Martians. They defeat them, and then they receive a message about Tarzan being back on Mars. So John Carter and Tars travel in a flyer to meet them near the Forest of Lost Men. And this is just another shout out to a previous story, one of Burroughs' stories. It's a forest containing two cities whose inhabitants have learned to turn invisible. It doesn't really affect this novel, but it's just a nice little shout out that he's using locations that fans of Burroughs' novels would recognize. Carter meets Tarzan, and he agrees to helping to stop the Barsoom invasion of Earth. They start by setting out to find the scientist Raz Tavas, who might have more information. That ends chapter 15. Um, so one thing I wanted to mention is that when Tarzan kills the white apes, he makes a loincloth out of their scalps, which I think is pretty epic myself. And I like how Will uses references to lots of Barsoomian stuff right away. The Caldanes, the Forest of Lost Men, the reference to Raz Thavas. We meet Lana of Gathol and her husband. All these shout outs to previous novels. For those of us who are familiar with those novels, they're fun Easter eggs. for those not familiar with the original novels, I think they help establish that Tarzan is definitely on a truly alien world. So it serves a purpose both for old fans and new fans. And it was just fun. Even though the Chaldeans are just a cameo, it was fun to see them again. They're a cool creation, and it's like Korak. You kind of want to see more of them. I don't know if his showing some of them developing a new ability to telepathically control their Rykors without being attached to them. I don't know if that's a hint at a future story or not. So, but comments from you guys about this?
Seems to me, and I'd have to look this up, that there was some mention either in an actual Burroughs story
Mhm.
or something's come after that written by somebody else of telepathic control of a Rykor.
Okay, so he
Seems
might
like there
be.
might be.
He might be.
Yeah, I did not.
Yeah, I don't remember that in Burroughs because I think Chessmen of Mars is the only one of the original novels
is.
where, well, okay.
It is.
So somebody else might have done. So he might be referring to something that someone else has put into the Burroughs universe.
There is
So
a Chaldean that appears in oh heck, um, Battle for Worcester, that book. There's a
okay,
Chaldean appears there, which
okay,
I think is Gek. But don't anybody quote me. I'm gonna have to look into this now that I've raised the topic.
okay.
The other thing, real quick, while I have the floor that I get out of the way, is Tarzan's all business in this story, I think.
Mhm.
And he takes, I think, a very systematic approach, what I call step-by-step procedure. So he may not actually spell it out for you, but you can see the wheels turning as he's
Mhm.
analyzing a problem or looking for a solution or how to resolve something. And I like that approach, and
Yeah.
Will has showcased that in previous his
Mhm.
previous Tarzan books. So I'm glad to see it here. That's all I have.
Mhm. Yeah, Tarzan has definitely no interest in playing tourist on Barsoom. He wants to get the job done and get home to Jane. So,
Right. And he was apprehensive. I meant to mention this earlier. He was apprehensive about going. He knew, I
mhm.
mean, he's not afraid to die, but he also knew that his only way he knows how to get to Barsoom is to die,
Yeah.
or the equivalent of dying.
Mhm.
So that's not something he's going to take lightly because it may not work and he may not come back. There is that possibility.
Yeah.
But it was necessary. Oh, let me point out another thing that in this universe, the Gridley wave may not be available to Barsoom. There's mention in one of these chapters, and I can't tell you where, but it's in one of the chapters that they're putting a Gridley wave in, I think, at Helium, but that occurs later in the story.
He actually, they do use the Gridley wave because they contact Jason and he sends a letter off to Africa, and
Right,
they also contact Abner Perry later
right,
to get instructions for how to build a mole.
right. Is that
That's in
early
the,
in the story? Yeah, they
yeah,
do. Is
it's a
that
little later in the
about
story.
midway in the story?
Okay, yeah.
Because that's something
So,
they did later. My point was that the way things are set up here, I
mm,
don't think Tarzan could have said, and he probably wanted to talk to him in person anyhow. But I don't
yeah,
think things were set up such that the Gridley wave, a message could be sent via Gridley wave at the beginning of the story. You want to talk to somebody on Barsoom, you got to go there.
yeah.
Is that first? Okay.
That's probably fair. Also, if he just traveled to California, where I think Jason was at the moment, and said, "Hey, I got to send a
Right.
Gridley Rave message to Mars," he could have
Mhm.
done that and have updated John Carter that way, but he would not have been personally on site to make sure that the invaders were stopped. And
Exactly.
he would have felt a personal responsibility, especially since it was primarily Africa at risk. Um,
Mhm.
if more Barsoomians arrived, he was going to want to take a personal hand in this.
Mhm.
So I think he could have gotten a Gridley wave there, but there would have been a travel delay because it's 1945 or 6. He can't jump on
Yeah,
a 747. And
definitely travel, right.
yeah, and then he would not have been personally there. I think he would have trusted John Carter to do everything John could,
Right.
but he wasn't there personally, and Tarzan's kind of a hands-on guy.
I
So,
agree. And the time he would have spent going from Africa to California or
mhm.
wherever he had to go, but most likely Jason's over in California. And the
Yeah.
time he was doing that, he could have been to Barsoom and back, perhaps
Mhm.
depending down there.
Yeah.
Um, or if there
Yeah.
was something he wasn't expecting, he may needed to stay longer in Barsoom. Either way, that's the way things developed, and I think I think your points are well taken.
He also doesn't know at this point how far along the next ship is. For all he knows, it could already be on its way. You know, he needs to get to Mars as quickly as possible and start dealing with this as quickly as possible. So,
which reminds me about a point I'm going to make on a future chapter about the value of time. But
yeah,
I'll save that for later. Go ahead.
Okay. Scott, any comments from you on chapters 11 through 15?
And just jumping off real quick about the Gridley Wave there too.
Mhm.
He, chances are Tarzan had no idea where Jason is.
Yeah.
So trying to track him down in the time that would take from actually going to Mars.
Mhm.
Plus, it'd be interesting to see Tarzan in Tarzana, California.
Yeah. That's
but
oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, but I did not find the change in narration from first person going to first person from third to be jarring at all. Actually, I thought it sped up the story because
Mhm.
it made it almost like small compartments or small books. Several chapters told this way, several chapters told that way. It was very easy to keep track of where you were and where you went with it. And I thought he did a great. Will Murray did a good job on that.
Yeah, I agree. Also, in this version of Tarzan's universe, he didn't know about Barsoom before he was there the first time, which means he wasn't reading Edgar Rice's Burroughs books about it, which, I kind of wonder about. The guy's doing your biography, Tarzan. Can't you read some of his other books as well? So that's an open question about how much he would have known about the Gridley Wave at this time. Well, no, he knew Jason personally, didn't he? From
well, it may depend on what universe we're in, as opposed to.
And he knew about Tarzan at the Earth's core. He knew about the Gridley Wave because that's how they got the SOS about David Innes.
Okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah, okay. So he knew about the Gridley Wave, but he didn't know about Mars, which I believe I wondered about that when I read Tarzan, Conqueror of Mars, but then I realized that Will was doing the right thing in creating a universe where he didn't know about Mars because he had to figure things out without any starting point at all when he got there the first time, which was really cool. So, so how much he knows about the Gridley Wave being in contact with Mars is an open question, because he apparently does not keep up on Edgar Rice Burroughs's books. Okay, and moving on to chapters 16 through 20, we're going to hit the halfway point. The protagonist, which is Tarzan and John Carter and Tars, they arrive at the city of Duhar, which is ruled by Vad Varo, who's what on Earth was known as Ulysses Paxton. He's the main character from Mastermind of Mars. They question him, and they question Raz Tavis, who was the mad scientist character from that novel, and who was also a main character in Synthetic Men of Mars, if I'm remembering correctly, wasn't he? And they find clues that narrow down the location of Nolthum, the lost city, but it still leaves them with a large area to search. So eventually, after searching, they find a mountain that appears to be an active volcano. But Tarzan realizes that it's coal, not lava, burning inside. And that reminds him of the insignia used by the Orivore that came to Earth. And he deduces that this is Nalthum, or at least an important landmark near Nalthum. So he jumps to the surface to reconnoiter on his own. When we get to chapter 17, that jumps back to third-person narration from Tarzan's point of view. He climbs to the top of the volcano, he knocks out a guard, and he gains access to this, secret volcano base. It's impossible not to think of James Bond whenever you get a secret volcano base. You only live twice. It was the movie where we got the ultimate example of a secret volcano base. So apparently Earthstravel Blofeld learned from bad guy Barsooms how to build a secret base. So he finds the location where another ship is being built by a renegade Martian scientist named Thal Sivis, and he was an antagonist from the novel Swords of Mars. So Will keeps pulling these points of characters and stuff from the original novels, which once again, for those of us who are fans of those novels, is just these extra cool Easter eggs. Tarzan damages the ship, but not seriously, before Thal Sivis blinds him with the glare of a welding torch. He keeps fighting the troops, and it looks like even though he's blind, he might win until Thal Sivis hits him from behind and knocks him out. He wakes up in a cell. He's initially still blind, although over the course of the next few events, he's going to gradually get his eyesight back. Pried of his cell door apart far enough to wiggle through. He overhears the Jadera, the queen of the Orovar, her name is Othuria, planning his execution, and he moves away from the voices. His vision does clear, and he finds an incubator full of eggs, but he doesn't damage them. He eventually finds an exit. He gets out just before the guards catch him. He hears them destroying the windlass that opens that exit door, so he knows there's no way back in that way. And he moves down a dark passage. He finds his way to a frozen tundra of the surface where he's attacked by a creature we know as fans of the original novels to be an apt. Tarzan doesn't know what it is. He's never seen it before. There's an epic fight where I think demonstrates just how much Will understands just how cool Tarzan is, in which Tarzan kills this apt. And that ends chapter 20. Tarzan's escaped from the base, killed a monster, and now knows where the invasion ship is. I should be noted that John Carter was very, he always considered himself the best sword fighter on two worlds. And he just easily acknowledges that Tarzan could outdo either him or Tarkus in a fight, mostly because Tarzan is bigger and stronger on Earth than John Carter would be. So he's got a strength and agility, proportional strength and agility advantage when he's on Mars. And John Carter's not a monumental egotist. He has no problem saying, hey, this Tarzan guy could probably take me. And I just love that Tarzan's prowess is further demonstrated when he's winning a fight against multiple opponents while blind, and he kills that ape single-handedly, and this just cool action stuff throughout. Comments from you guys?
You include chapter 20 there, right?
Yep.
Oftentimes the final chapter, at least sometimes the final chapter in this book, I beg your pardon, the final paragraph at the end of a given chapter of this book sometimes has something that sounds kind of profound, like maybe a narrator, Rod Sterling, is stepping to wrap up that chapter for and then introduce the next episode here. But for example, the end of chapter 20, this is bear with me for a moment here. Tarzan of the Apes had again conquered. It did not matter to him that he did not know the name of this fallen beast, most likely that ape you were talking about, nor would the ape man have cared much to learn that Barsoom called this voracious carnivore of its northern regions an ape. So it is. He only regretted that he lacked a sharp tool enough to carve out a stake or claim his thick pelt for a cloak. Now that's Tarzan all the way, right there.
That is.
I think it's informative, it's significant, and you'll find let's say nuggets or jewels like this oftentimes at the tail end of each chapter in this book. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. That could be, if you read that to me and said that was from a Burroughs novel and I didn't know any better, I would say, yeah, that's Burroughs. That's exactly Burroughs describing Tarzan.
I agree.
That's how well Will understands the characters he's dealing with. So, yeah. Scott, any comments?
Yeah, I like the way Tarzan was, if you want to call it, temporarily defeated, using the bright of like a welding torch like that, blinding the eyes, a weapon you're not expecting, something that's so bright that it takes that out. I thought that was a really novel way of doing that at that point. And then I didn't really have any trouble with him escaping and going off in blind, because in other Burroughs novels, like in the core of the earth and stuff like that, there are characters in caverns so dark they can't see, and they're finding their way through that way. So it's a matter of what's around the next corner, or what's ahead in pitch darkness we don't see. And with Tarzan's instincts of hearing and smell and touch and stuff, I can go along with that part of it. It's not jumping the shark. It works for that way, and I think he did a nice job on that.
I agree. I also want to say that Val Civis he's old, even by Martian standards, and he's a scientist, not a warrior. Ignoring the fact that he's a villain, he doesn't do bad here. I mean, he gets the best of Tarzan by blinding him and then knocking him out from behind. So got to give the guy props where he earns them. He's a total villain, but he handles himself well when faced by the guy who's probably the finest warrior on 2 planets. So,
Yeah.
um, okay, moving on to chapters 21 through 25. 21 switches back again to first-person narration by John Carter. They wait through the night while Tarzan is off in the volcano, and they return to the volcano. 3 of the Orovar soldiers rise up on the flying metal birds to fight them. Tarkus, using a radium rifle, shoots 2 of them out of their saddles. The third tries to flee, but then Tarzan comes back into the picture when he leaps up from the ground and he tosses away the rider and he takes telepathic control of the bird. He flies to the ship. He brings John Carter up to speed on Nalthum, and they return to the city of Duhar to make plans. Once there, they discuss their options. Then, knowing that the 2 entrances Tarzan found could be easily guarded. Finally, someone comes up with the idea of replicating Abner Perry's iron mole. And there's a Gridley wave conversation with Jason Gridley that gets them the plans, and the scientists of Helium start to build the mole. So they're going to tunnel their way into the volcano base. While the mole is being built, there's occasional scouting missions sent to Nalthum, but no other entrances are found. Tarzan renews his acquaintance with Kar Komak, the bowman, the archer, who was willed into existence in the book Thuvia, Made of Mars. His backstory is complicated. He was brought up as an illusion archer who could still kill people, and then he by a telepathic race, and then he just stayed in existence after he was supposedly banished. And he has the ability himself to temporarily bring up more, a bowmen who are archers who are sort of illusions, but can actually do physical damage while they're manifesting. So we're told he's going to play an important part of this in this story, and he does. Also, there's a neat scene where John Carter challenges Tarzan to a friendly sword duel, in which Tarzan can't use his full strength. That's how he won against John Carter in this previous trip. And John Carter just wants to see who can win on skill alone. The duel lasts an hour before Carter gets a touch on Tarzan and wins, though he suspects that Tarzan might have let him win. So the question is not definitively answered who's better in a fight, Tarzan or John Carter. The mole is completed in about 2 Earth months. John Carter, Tarkus, Vad Vero, that's the other Earthman who lives on Mars, and Kar Komak will crew the mole after it's transported to Nalthum by airship. This is the battleship Dija Thoris. Tarzan will take to the air on his captured bird. They're called the Malagor. And he's hoping that when he shows up on the bird, the Orovar will launch some of their Malagor, and he'll be able to spot wherever the hidden hangar is. The third part of this plan is that the battleship would be firing on the volcano as a diversion for the mole. So the mole will be tunneling in with 4 of the best warriors on the planet. Tarzan will be using his captured metal bird to try and find the hangar that the bird's launched from and get in that way. And the battleship's giving everybody cover by just firing. We get to chapter 24. That chapter ends with John Carter piloting the mole through Nalthum. Chapter 25 goes back to third-person narration, but this is from the villain's point of view. This is from Val Civis, the scientist's point of view. We get some background here. He had fallen in with the Orovar after fleeing at the end of the Swords of Mars. He had built them the mechanical birds, and he'd supplied them with some radium rifles, which they didn't usually have. He built them a telescope from which their queen, Othuria, could examine Earth, and she decided to colonize it after examining it. So, we learned that Val Civis has pretty much completed the new, larger interplanetary ship, which the Jadera plans to use to transport herself and some of the eggs to Earth. But he hasn't told anyone that it's finished because he's afraid that he'll be killed when he's no longer useful. It's becoming obvious as we read this that Othuria is just living in crazy town. She's completely nuts. You'd never know what she's going to do. Or he's also afraid that he'll be brought to Earth as no more than a slave. But he also fears John Carter. And we also learned that there's very few women in Nalthum. Except for Othuria, they're all servants. Othuria mates with the most virile males in order to perpetuate a strong race. So that is chapters 1 through 25. There's a casual mission, or casual mention that Perry carried out a World War II mission with the Iron Mole. And Jess, you talked to Will about this, and he said that that's a hint towards an as yet unwritten adventure. So there might be
Yes, that's a fair statement.
yes, there might be. So someday, I hope this happens because this is just cool. That Abner Perry will use the mole in some sort of anti-Nazi operation.
Another Iron Mole in
Yeah,
our future.
I just love that idea. And I love the way that Will keeps bringing various elements of the ERB universe into the story. In this case, Perry's Iron Mole idea becomes a major plot point here on Mars in this story. Comments from you guys?
Well, I got a couple things here real quick. I hope they're real quick. One, I just realized why you take Bance to Earth with you.
Okay.
And that is because the commentator says the Jadara is nuts. So if Billy is going to knock on your door with a bantha or two with her and go pay a visit there, Tim, for your assessment of her abilities there. I'm being funny, but that thought did occur to me. I will say also on these final comments on some of these chapters, I'll give as homework to our listeners. Be sure to take a look at the final comment at the end of chapter 21. There's some discussion there that I think it's John Carter has with himself, as opposed to how Tarzan and he would handle a situation. So I thought that might be of some interest. I do want to go to another final chapter here. I was greatly concerned about how long is it going to take a person or a team to build an Iron Mole, a whole planet over from where the idea was originally conceived, and you're getting all your information via probably Gridley wave, and which may mean diagrams and may mean technical specs and those kinds of things. So how well is this going to work? This ain't going to be done overnight, guys. And they took roughly 2 months. So I was concerned about the time involved, but Will does address that here at the tail end of chapter 23, where he says, after that interlude, we turned our attention back to the increasingly desperate race, he said, to build a burrowing machine capable of penetrating Mount Nalthum. So there, and I think it's also stated elsewhere in the book, it does acknowledge that they are running a race against time. And there's nothing that's going to make those bad guys say, well, we can't leave yet. They haven't built their Iron Mole. We got to wait on them. No. If they're ready to go, they're going to take off. So it is a race against time. That's the point I wanted to make. I'm done. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I had a similar concern about the mole, but I think it came through well and enjoyed seeing it in action. And I appreciate having some of the backstory on Civis, since the Swords of Mars, to kind of fill in that gap, not ignore it. And then I do know I want to see these mechanical birds on the big screen.
That would be cool. They are a great addition to the Martian mythology. They're just a wonderful visual, aren't they? I will say, Val Civis, even though he was delaying the completion of the ship out of self-preservation, he was helping the good guys, so they didn't know it. From the good guys' point of view, it's always going to be tension all the time. It'll take 2 months to build the mole. They don't know if the bad guys are going to launch their ship tomorrow or 2 months from now or 3 months from now. They don't know. So they just got to move forward and hope they have enough time. And it's fortunate for them that Val Civis, through completely selfish reasons, was delaying telling Othuria that the ship was finished, because he didn't know what was going to happen to him. So it's kind of cool that that all comes together nicely in order to give the good guys just enough time and make it work as a story. It's not contrived or anything. It all makes sense if the story flows nicely.
One more thing real quick regarding Iron Mole. I don't want anybody to think that I have anything against that Iron Mole. It's one of my favorite machines. In fact, I was writing about it today on another paper about how essential I think the Iron Mole is to science fiction, and doesn't get much attention. So don't anybody think that I'm anti-Iron Mole. I am not. I just wanted to recognize that you can't build the thing overnight, and it's going to take a little while. That was my whole point. All right, go ahead.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay, well, chapters 26 through 30. The mole is now traveling underground towards Nalthum very slowly. They hit a pocket of muddy water, and water begins to leak in. So they're forced to stop to prevent the water from rising enough to fry the electrical system. And John Carter radios Deja Thoris to begin the attack on the volcano. They don't know if they're going to get the mole going or not. Aboard the battleship, they approach the volcano. They use the coal fire burning atop it as a beacon. And as they approach, this light goes out. So when the order to attack comes, Tarzan mounts his captured robot Malagor, his bird, and he orders it to return to its hangar. Remember, he has telepathic control of it now. So he just says, go home, hoping that will help him locate the hidden hangar door. Inside Nalthum, Val Civis plans to finish the interplanetary ship at dawn, but he's called to the bottommost chamber of the volcano city to try and identify a grinding sound coming from beneath the ground. And he deduces that it's a mechanical device that's burrowing towards the ground towards them. So he's ordered to get the spaceship ready and promises that it will be ready when it's needed, even though he's still very concerned about his own fate. Now, aboard the mole, Tarkus comes up with the idea of using their swords to punch holes in the deck of the mole to drain water that's seeped aboard, and the mole's able to continue towards Nalthum. Now, chapter 30 is told from the enemy's point of view. Val Civis finds that he's told he has to go to Earth or die. Othuria orders the eggs from the city's incubators to be loaded aboard the spaceship, which will launch as soon as possible. The mole and the battleship are both seen approaching. The battleship opens fire. Othuria orders soldiers flying the robot Malagars to launch a hopeless attack on the battleship. And a soldier named Tun Dun Lo leads a force of soldiers to confront the mole after the mole breaks into the city. So you have all this action going on. And Will does an excellent job of describing this action. At no point was I confused. I understood where all the good guys were. I understood what all the bad guys were. I understood what their tactics were. It's a very exciting stuff. And it all makes logical sense within the context of the world within the context of the story that Will is writing here. It's just an excellent job. These chapters are very short as the pace of the action picks up. And another thing that impresses me about Will is that he could change point of view from one chapter to another and change from first-person narration to third person without ever being confusing. And he describes the action well. I think I already said that. We're aware of the tactical situation, so we understand the action as it unfolds. Comments from you guys?
Aboard the Iron Mole, Tarkus is included among the crew there on the Iron Mole. And I was just thinking, and I don't have numbers in front of me, but Tarkus is a pretty good sized fellow, as I recall. So
he might have been crouching a lot, but
that's my point. I was wondering how he squeezed in there is my point.
Yeah, but if you have a chance to bring Tarkus along to a fight, you don't say no. If he has to crouch, you say just crouch. We want you there. So yeah, you don't.
I agree totally. That's a very good point.
Yes, of all the list of people you would want to bring to a fight, Tarkus is in the top 5 at least. So
I guarantee you, John Carter would list him very highly and choose to Tarkus with him.
Yeah, well, he'd be number 1 for John Carter. Like anytime we go into fight, if I have my choice, Tarkus is going to be at my side.
I just felt sorry for him being all bent over in that iron mold because it's probably
he'll have to go to the Barsoomian chiropractor afterwards.
Okay, that's enough for me. Go
ahead. Okay, Scott. Comments?
Yeah, well, that's a good point about his size and the size of the iron mold. Because earlier in the book, he stays outside when they're going into the one house to talk to the other scientists, so you realize that's got to be pretty cramped quarters. I wasn't too sure about if that mole is burrowing through the earth or the ground of Mars like that, if you could run your swords through the skin to let the water seep out. But yeah, I didn't think about it at the time until we're talking about now, because like you said, it's moving so quick. And, he seems, in my mind, he's kind of following a way that we've mentioned before about ERB's original book, in which the last couple of chapters a lot of times get a little shorter, and he's just amping up the action because you're getting to the climax.
Yeah. Okay. I guess, well, of course, John Carter and his allies would all have swords made out of the best metal available. So being able to punch through the iron mold seal, I didn't have a problem with that. I was okay with that. So their sword points might have been a little duller than they normally wanted when they went in the battle, but it worked. It got them there. So
Yes,
In moments of desperation, you do what you got to do.
you do what you got to do.
you do.
Yeah. So chapters 31 through 35. John Carter and his allies exit the mole and they carve their way through a group of enemy soldiers. And several soldiers retreat up the stairs and they barricade themselves in a room. So Targus works on breaking into that room to get those guys so that they don't leave an enemy force behind them. And the others keep moving up the volcano. They're inside the volcano on stairs. And I should say this place has stairs, which the Martians aren't used to. The Barsoomians usually use ramps, so stairs was new for a lot of them, but they got the hang of them pretty quick. They kept moving up to try and find the spaceship. Tarzan, meanwhile, he's out on his robot bird. He meets 3 enemy Malagor riders in midair combat. He kills 2, and when his Malagor is damaged, he jumps to the remaining enemy Malagor. He takes control of it. He throws the poor pilot off. Actually, he was a bad guy. I actually felt a little sorry for that guy, though. He sees the spaceship coming out of a large hatch on the volcano's summit. The Malagor, though, takes him through a hidden hangar entrance where he meets up with Tarkus, and these two rush to join John Carter. Now, at the spaceship, there's not enough room for all the Orovar soldiers who had expected to come because Othuria and her eggs are going on this trip. The original plan was for them to go on a later trip. Othuria tells them to fight among themselves for who gets to go, and then she can enjoy the spectacle of them killing one another. So Val Civis opts to go on the ship, though he recognizes that Othuria lives in Crazy Town. He just doesn't want to stick around and meet John Carter. John Carter, Vad Vero, and Kar Komak charge in. That causes Othuria to order her men to stop killing each other and attack the intruders. It's just great action stuff. Charging up towards the spaceship, John Carter and his friends are attacked from 2 sides. Kar Komak materializes a line of phantom archers who take out most of the enemy. When an arrow grazes Kar's skull, his archers disappear, but they've done their job. They charge into the spaceship hangar. Outnumbered, they're forced to retreat again. Kar's head wound keeps him from summoning up more phantom archers. His own bow is damaged. Vad Vero is wounded. The situation looks hopeless. And then Tarzan and Tarkus pull up a big darn hero moment and they charge in and they turn the tide of the battle. The surviving enemy troops pile onto the spaceship. And when the ship launches, John Carter and Tarzan both hang on. Carter's forced to let go, but Tarzan keeps climbing up towards a hatch. But when he gets to the hatch, and just remember, he's on the outside of a spaceship, which is moving towards the outside of the atmosphere. He doesn't. There's no handle to grasp onto this hatch and wrench it open, and the atmosphere is growing thin. So Tarzan lets go and he falls, and he's falling from too great a height to survive. And I love this moment because I didn't know. I knew Tarzan was going to save himself somehow, but I didn't know how. So this was a wonderful moment for me. He summons up a robot Malagar, but telepathically to save him. The robot bird comes out and catches him. And the good guys all rejoin inside the volcano where they free the women slaves and they discover there's no surviving men other than those on the ship. They find Val Civis, who had left the ship through a secret hatch. He explains the robot brain piloting the ship is locked on course to Earth. So everyone heads back to helium aboard the battleship. And really, all I have to say about this is that these were wonderful action scenes, especially John Carter's last stand before Tarzan and Tars show up. And Tarzan's fall from the spaceship, as I mentioned, was just a great moment. How is he going to live? He's falling from the upper atmosphere. He can't survive this. No, he's got telepathic control of these robot birds. He just gets one to come and catch him. That was awesome. I love that. Comments from you guys?
I would like to comment on Othuria's management style. I've been blessed in my real life working career. I've been blessed with some pretty good bosses. But I learned early on that if a boss is willing to sacrifice all their employees, that's not a good place to work. So I would submit to Othuria's troops there that they may want to look for another job.
Yeah, but they think of her as a goddess, though. That's the trouble. So you have fanaticism working against them. And also, I guess
all very excited to have an opportunity to spend time with her.
Yeah, I guess she's just gorgeous too. So, if you can kill your 2 friends, you can sleep with me. Okay. So But yes, I love Authiria as a villain is a great villain. She really is totally wacko, but she's wacko in a entertaining villainous way, if that makes sense. So, Scott, any comments?
Yeah, I go along with the whole thing. This thing is just straight on action, one roll right after another. And
Hmm.
really, you can see it moves very fast. You
Hmm.
know you're getting to the end of the book and you're still waiting to see
Yeah.
what else is going to happen.
Hmm. And I enjoy how well Will plotted out this action. Once again, it's potentially complex storytelling because the good guys are scattered in several different places. But once again, you always know where everybody is. You always know what is going on, and the tactics they're using make sense in the situation they're in. And it's a wonderfully constructed action scene. It's one of Will Murray's best, which is, I think, saying a lot because he always does great action scenes.
Yeah, this scene here with him on the rocket makes me think back to, I think it's a Wally Wood drawing. Tarzan's on a spaceship, or a guy that looks like Tarzan ripping the hatch open, or the cockpit bubble off of a spaceship. It's pretty iconic science
Hmm.
fiction
Yeah.
picture from the 60s or 70s.
Okay. I think I know that one. The Wollywood. I think I know that one. That is a great illustration. So, um, okay, moving on. We're going to finish the book up. Chapters 35 through 40. Tarzan teleports himself back to Earth, and he gathers his Wazari up to wait for the spaceship because the spaceship has to physically travel from Mars to Earth, whereas Tarzan can get there instantly through teleporting. It doesn't land in the same spot as the first one did, so they begin to scout. Tarzan takes one group of Wazari and Korak takes another group, and they go in different directions to find it. Tarzan finds it, and it's full of dead men because the soldiers had all killed each other for the right to be Otheria's next mate. She decides that she only needs two men because she's got all her eggs. So she just got them to kill each other until there were only two of them left. So Tarzan finds Otheria and the two surviving soldiers, along with the eggs nearby. One soldier kills the other, then Tarzan kills him. And Otheria still maintains that Africa is now hers, and she dumps into the water for a swim. The trouble being is that she's not familiar with water because she comes from Mars and she doesn't know how to swim. And before Tarzan can save her, she's eaten by a crocodile. Um, Tarzan and the Wazari load the eggs back on the ship, and from questioning Val Civis before returning to Earth, Tarzan knows how to mentally reprogram the robot's brain, so he sends the eggs back to Barsoom. And what happens to them, we're told, will be another story. So some of the plot points is here, we might have been expecting another Wazari versus Martian battle, but we got one of those. We got a really cool one at the beginning of the ship. So I like that Will did something different at the climax, just rather than just repeating a battle we'd already have. Um, Also, a possible looking ahead to other stories, he does leave Tarzan in possession of his P-40 fighter. It's not used in the climax, so I think once again he might be putting in stuff he's able to use in as yet unwritten adventures. So comments on you guys for the ending of the book?
Well, I have to just simply point out, and I realize these guys are from Barsoom, and as we've established, they don't have much water or lakes there. But as many troops as Otheria sacrificed,
Mhm.
just out of her need to protect herself, I just happen to think probably one of those guys was a swimming instructor, and she should have kept him around. She's almost swimming on Earth.
Yeah. Or she should have packed
That that
she should have packed some water wings, just gone to the pool store and
water
bought
wings, yeah, something.
bought something. So but it made sense for the character. Murray's done a great job of establishing her as being kind of nuts. And so just saying, no, this is my world, the water's mine, I can jump in it and I'll be fine, and then getting eaten is an appropriate ending for her.
She stuck. She stuck her foot in it this time. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
So she was killed by her own insanity and ego, which is what were her defining
exactly.
characteristics.
And
So
that's a shame because she's the kind of villain I'd like to see come back in a future story
well,
too.
maybe she has a identical daughter in one of those eggs. So
Good idea.
yeah.
I'd like to point out, though, too, for people who haven't read the book or uh, it isn't like just on a whimsy type thing, like, oh, I'm ruler of everything, I'm gonna go swimming.
Mhm.
It's like she's not aware there's not water like this up in Mars.
Yeah.
So to her, it's like this treasure paradise thing. I'm gonna celebrate by jumping into the water, not realizing what that constitutes. And I also like the part where even with how nuts crazy she is, Tarzan's deep goes in to go after a crocodile too, but when he retrieves of her, it's like, oh, what's left
Mhm.
isn't worth saving. May as well feed the
Mhm.
rest of the crocodile.
Yeah. Well, Tarzan
Where he
always,
says
always
there's nothing really left to bury.
Yeah, Tarzan always had his chivalry towards women, even when they were evil. So I think him killing Othuria himself in some way would not have seemed right for the character. So Will came up with a
Yeah,
great way an appropriate way of bringing her to an end.
I agree. If Tarzan let Bertha Kirchner live,
Yeah.
as little as he thought of her, and
Mm,
even saved her from trouble, and he still looked down upon her because of who he thought she was.
mhm.
If he's willing to do that, no, wouldn't have a chance with him.
Yeah. Um, just what would you have done with Othuria? I mean, you would have had to have let her wear the anti-gravity armor, but put her in an insane asylum. What else could you have done? Um, she would have been
I keep
awkward
the
having her
male
around.
away from her because she'd sacrifice everyone.
She would. So, um, okay, and that is the end of the book. And I'm just going to repeat what I said at the beginning of the book: is that Will Murray is a superb storyteller who keeps his story moving well. He can he can uh, explain potentially complicated action scenes in a way that we can easily understand and follow the action. He understands the characters in the Burroughs universe perfectly, and he turned out one of my favorite non-Burroughs novels set within the Burroughs universe. Um, whether or not this is official continuity doesn't really matter because it's just a great story. Um, I was I was when I was growing up, I grew up on DC and Marvel comics, so I was big on continuity. I wanted everything to fit into continuity. As I get older, I kind of like the idea of seeing the individual stories as individual legends about these characters and don't worry as much about whether they fit into a timeline. So
Well,
kind of my attitude has changed over the years.
I like to categorize things too,
Yeah.
but I will say this though, this most definitely fits into the Will Murray universe.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
yeah.
this was it I can't count three Tarzan novels now, and
Mm-hmm.
probably you could throw in Doc Savage and Shadow Works if you want to,
Yeah.
but
Well,
this story will certainly fit in with the other Tarzan
four
books over the
Tarzan
years.
novels. He wrote Tarzan meets King Kong, didn't he? Um,
Yes, he did. Okay, I give you four. You're exactly
Yeah,
right. That's the one
and
myself. I
and
should know
he
that.
wrote, and I know he doesn't have the legal right to put these characters together, but he wrote a Doc Savage meets King Kong one, which was a lot of fun. I read that during a 14-hour layover in Johannesburg. That's how
Mhm.
I survived that layover.
Well,
Was reading Doc Savage meets
yeah,
versus King Kong. So if
yeah.
you want to look at his universe as its own little thing, you
Mhm.
could pretend that Doc Savage and Tarzan do coexist, even if you
Right.
can't legally put them in the same book.
Well, yeah,
He's
exactly. It's the canon. As big a
Mm.
fan and believer as I am in canon,
Mhm.
universes, and multiple universes, sort of thing. It's all in our own head.
Yeah.
We can define it, we can define it however we want to,
Hmm.
and so I think setting up a Will Murray universe is a
Yeah.
very natural
Oh,
thing to
we
do.
we all we all have our head canon. I mean,
Yeah, that's my point.
in my head canon, Star Trek 1 and 5 don't exist. So they never happened. Yeah, and so yeah, it's just as an example of another universe. And also, since the ERB universes books are introducing the concepts of multiple dimensions, you could just say that the Will Murray universe is one of the dimensions within that continuity. So you could pretty
Most
much
definitely.
combine them anyway. So, um,
Yeah, exactly.
but in the end, he wrote an excellent Tarzan John Carter story. So whether everybody can put it into their own head canon wherever they want. It doesn't matter because it's going to be
That's
an entertaining
exactly my
story.
point.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was trying to say. Very good.
Mhm. So, yeah.
and Will Murray's also a pope and fiction historian too. Yeah, no, I can't
Hmm.
remember the name of the book, but years ago he put out a book. Uh, uh, that talks about pulp adventure and
Yeah.
the themes and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Well, he
Recommend that you
knows the
can track it
material, no
down
question.
hard. I don't think it's out on physical copies anymore, but you can find it digital
Hmm.
or
Yeah,
maybe in a used bookstore someplace.
yeah. Well, I think aside from just being a technically good writer, I think you can see anytime he writes about these characters, not just the Burroughs character, but the Shadow, Doc Savage, the Spider, all of those guys, whoever he's dealing with. I think you can see his love and appreciation for those characters in it, that he wants to treat them with appropriate respect and present them the way they should be presented. I think he appreciates what the writers who created them did and wants to continue on with that without in any way spoiling it. And because he's a great writer, he succeeds in doing that. But I think I'm just presuming to speak for him because I've never met him, but I just think it's his love for these characters that are a major part of what make his books so good.
Well,
Writings in Bronze was the book title I was trying to think of.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
To your point, I have had the good fortune of meeting with him, and I've talked to him several times. He is very careful about canon. He's very careful about getting the story right, getting the characters right, and being in tune with stuff that's come before him, so to speak. So he's very particular about canon and getting it right. So I have to underline that. I can tell you that from personal experience.
So, yeah, and I'm not surprised to hear that. So the world was fortunate when Will Murray became a fan of the pulps and then decided to continue the writing because he's just given us tons and tons of great stories. And I'm glad you mentioned the Return to Paludan because I really had lost track of that hidden on my Kindle. So I need to go back and read that one.
That's a great book.
Yeah, it is.
I have no doubt of that. Yeah. So, okay. Any other final comments before we wrap up this episode?
I was just going to say it took us, and if I can say it quickly, I hope, it took us just under an hour and a half to move through this entire book. This is a good sized book. I can get you a page count if anybody wants it. But it took us just under an hour and a half to go through this, and because the book itself is fast paced, chapters are short. You got, oh man, I finished another one. Oh man, I finished another one, and there's still more here to come. It's all good stuff. I love it. But my point is that you can move through this story pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's well orchestrated. I said it takes Tarzan has a very step-by-step procedure. The whole thing has a very step-by-step procedure. So you can see where they're going pretty quick. It's simply a very fun and entertaining read. And you can get through it pretty quick. And as proof of that, I submit how fast we went through this thing tonight. We covered it, I think, at good time.
Where we took where our record is taking 3 episodes to talk about Beasts of Tarzan, and we often have to do 2 episodes for a lot of books. So that's
a fast-paced book too. Beasts of Tarzan.
Yes, we would not collectively we could not shut up about that book, could we? So, Scott, any final?
It's worthy of high praise.
It is. Scott, any final comments on the book before we do our announcements for next time?
Jess, it was a pleasure to read. It was a wonderful ride. I'd give it a great big thumbs up to be cliched about it.
So, okay, well, next time we were thinking that because Val Civis was a main character in this one, and he originated in the book Swords of Mars. And I didn't initially place the name because it's been years since I last read Swords of Mars, but we're going to talk about in our next episode. We haven't scheduled it yet. But when we're able to get to recording another episode, we're going to talk about Swords of Mars. So we're going to remain on Barsoom for a while. I'm resisting the temptation to suggest we do a Gilligan's Island episode this time. Although the Jungle Boy episode is funny, and the little Jungle Boy is obviously would not exist if Tarzan hadn't existed. So there is a Gilligan's Island Tarzan connection there.
That's one with Kurt Russell we talked about, right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. It's a fun episode.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell.
Yeah. Very young Kurt Russell. Now he's very old Kurt Russell.
He's Eagle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just always just as an actor, it's like always interesting that he started out in Disney movies and Gilligan's Island episodes and all, and then he became like a hardcore action star in the 80s. It was kind of an interesting jump to make, and he did it successfully. He was great.
Had a good long career.
Yeah, he has.
He had to grow up.
Yeah, he did. Um, so next time Swords of Mars, I'm hoping we can schedule that sometime in the next couple months, but our respective schedules are why we do not do these on a like once a month basis or anything. We just can't quite manage that. But we'll do them whenever we can, and next time will be Swords of Mars. Scott, you want to plug anything before as we say goodbye?
Yeah, Herb Appa, you can find that out on Herbzine if anyone's interested in about what it is and what past issues are. Looks right now we have 2 slots open. Looks like one of those is going to close. We only have a limit, or we have a limit of 36 members. And it looks like one of them is going to close, so there's only one there. So if someone's interested in getting in on the action and sharing their artwork or their articles and things they like, all things to paraphrase Jess's Facebook page, all things Edgar Rice Burroughs, love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs. You get all kinds of great resources and information, entertainment if you're a member of Herb Appa.
Cool.
And we're celebrating our 40th year this year.
Cool.
Issue 160 is coming up.
Okay, Jess, you want to plug anything on our way out?
You know, I think Scott just gave me a plug. He mentioned my group, which I am very grateful for. For the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs is where you'll find me pretty near 24/7 talking ERB. Have a fine group of people in there. We're growing. Come on over and join our growth spurt and talk Burroughs with us. For the love of all things Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'm done.
Okay, and my name is Tim DeForest. Please visit my blog at comicsradio.blogspot.com, and you can find links to my books on amazon.com there. And I just talk about pulp magazines, just any sort of pre-digital pop culture, old-time radio, comic books, comic strips, whatever it occurs to me to write about any one week, I write about. I appreciate those people who do read the blog, and feel free to buy my books and make me rich. I wouldn't object to that.
And they're good books too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, and that's it for this time, and we'll see you all hopefully soon.